She went under the wheels.
How affected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels Reborn. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And today we get into some bad I should have given this more thought, because last night I was thinking of a good introduction about how make sure you don't eat your food, because today we're gonna have plenty of things that have a bad taste. Some really stupid pun, but oh well, there goes that.
From Peter Jackson's bad taste under the wheel.
Spoilers! But yeah, we're putting Peter Jackson's bad taste under the wheels, which is funny because sure, we'll talk a little bit about it when we actually start talking about bad taste, but there's a clear delineation right at Lord of the Rings between oh yeah, Peter Jackson, and then Sir Peter Jackson. But you have to start somewhere, and bad taste is as good a place as any to start a career, I guess.
I'd say so. I mean, I think his I'm trying to see what he did between Heavenly Creatures and Lord of the Rings, and he was still doing schlocky horror comedies. Yeah, like The Frighteners.
Yeah.
So
Which was it was schlocky and comedic, but I don't think it intended to be. It was the movie that drove Michael J. Fox back to television. I don't know if you I thought
Michael J. Fox retired from acting by 1997 or something.
He did, but he did The Frighteners, which came out right around 1996, and then he was in. So The Frighteners takes place in America, but shot in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. So he was filming in New Zealand, and he was getting depressed because he would get care packages of VHS recorded sitcoms that he would sit down and watch, and then he was like, man, I miss making sitcoms. So then he went and he did Spin City for 3 or 4 years until his Parkinson's became really bad. Mm-hmm. And then he, ostensibly just became the big or whatever on he would come in on television shows for an easy paycheck. Well, it wasn't easy for him because, they would give him a bunch of lines and force him to stand still. But but he took on a number of supporting character roles that were pretty good up until I think at this point now he really can't do any acting.
Well, he's in some new awful CBS drama comedy drama that is a spin-off of another CBS show that was popular.
Really?
Yeah, because he's not on the main poster for it, but I saw some little trailer embedded in a banner ad on Yahoo or something. And yeah, Michael J. Fox, or a guy who looked like the spitting image of Michael J. Fox, was there. So
the guy who did Marty McFly's voice in the Back to the Future games.
It's actually Crispin Glover in heavy makeup.
Crispin, we hired you so you wouldn't have to do that Michael J. Fox twitchy thing. No. I'm just really into the role, guys. I'm just really into the role.
I know. He's just it's I don't have to do it? I thought that was the whole reason I wanted to do this.
Yeah. Come on. Why are you getting rid of all of the reasons for me to have fun with the role? God, that's weird. Oh, wow. He was in Designated Survivor.
What?
Yeah.
Is that the Kiefer Sutherland show?
Yeah, it looks like he was in there for 5-ish episodes.
Huh.
Yeah, he's pretty much made a career out of playing and special guest star Michael J. Fox. So that all of the kids who are watching the show are who's that? And then we're oh, Back to the Future guy. But yeah,
Okay, yeah, I wasn't hallucinating. It was Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, well, there's it looks like TV series Corner Gas Animated.
I don't know about that, but he was in The Good Wife, and I think whatever this new spin-off show is a spin-off of The Good Wife.
The Good Fight?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. What the heck? I know we've spent an inordinate amount of time on Michael J. Fox for no particular reason, but apparently in Back to the Future, the game, the 30th anniversary edition, he did Willie McFly and Marty McFly, the future voice. Oh, cool. So he did get in on, he was able to get in on some of that sweet Back to the Future, the game by Telltale Games, who went belly ups money. So that's good.
Telltale Games.
They
Oh
were
yeah,
so-
that's right. There was a Back to the Future game. I completely forgot about that. It
Yeah.
looks so janky.
Yeah,
Was it good?
with what's his name? Christopher Lloyd, who like I always thought was old because of Back to the Future, but it turns out like in Back to the Future he was like mid 40s, I guess, or like early 40s.
Yeah.
And so like now that he's like really old and you expect him to kind of talk at the same pace, but no, he sounds like he's gotten a few too many movie miles on him at this point.
Too many. I like how movies put mileage on people. Like we're talking about him like he's a a football player or like a boxer or something.
It's like the president. Every movie you're in, like if you were in a movie for 4 years, you would age 10 years, but because you're only on a movie for a couple of months, you only age like 2 or 3 years at a time. Fuck, what were we talking? Peter Jackson, right?
Yeah. Wait, we have to do our usual like thing. What have you been watching lately?
Yeah, I know. I was gonna try and bring it back around to that.
Okay.
We're off to a great start. What have you been watching lately?
Well, let's see. I rewatched As Good as It Gets, that rom-com with Jack Nicholson, where he falls in love with Helen Hunt, who's like 30 years younger than him or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered, I saw it before, like a long time ago, and I remember it being like, pretty good for a rom-com anyway. And then when I watched it again recently, I'm like, wow, this movie's a lot more like vicious than I remember it being. Like, Jack Nicholson is so horribly cruel to everybody. I'm like, wait, how are we supposed to like this guy? Like, how is he supposed to be the main character? And he's such an asshole that you don't buy his character transformation by the end.
Really?
It's so bizarre. Yeah, at least I didn't this time. I mean, I bought it the first time, but this time I'm like how did this guy who is so awful like suddenly change this much in such a short span of time? And also, there's a weird thing where like he changes, but he can't change too much, otherwise like all of the edgy humor of the movie is gone. Because Jack Nicholson, in addition to being the main character and the main villain, is also the main comic relief. Everyone else is just sort of plays the straight man or is the victim of his dark humor or the darkly humorous situations that his awful personality creates. So it's weird that like when they have to make him into the nice guy at the end, it feels like they're kind of scrambling to do it.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it's like all the humor of the movie suddenly just goes away because you're like, oh, this isn't like a comedy anymore. It's just kind of like a weird romance now. It's a weird romance that doesn't totally make sense because Jack Nicholson's so mean to everyone.
Right.
And also, it's like, I didn't notice this when I was a lot younger, but now it's just the age difference between him and Helen Hunt really stands out. And I'm like, oh my God.
Well, then don't watch that one movie with him and Diane Keaton. I can't remember the name of it. He's dating Amanda Peet because the age difference will just stand out even more in that.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah.
All that said, As Good as It Gets is like a pretty solid movie for the most part. Just because like for most of the movie, he is this terrible asshole, and watching him being mean to everyone is kind of funny.
It's like oddly satisfying.
It's oddly, like, you feel bad for the people he's constantly, like, insulting or assaulting, but at the same time, like, it's James L. Brooks, who's a funny guy, so he manages to make it work, and, like, even though you feel bad, like, you can still laugh at the same time.
Interesting.
So yeah, I mean, that, it's pretty good. Also, Greg Kinnear does a good job in it as like this flamboyant artist guy, and I think Cuba Gooding Jr. is his boyfriend. Their dynamic's really funny, because like Greg Kinnear he's such like a wimp. He can't stand up for himself. Like he's always taking all this shit from Jack Nicholson and from everyone in his life, and then Cuba Gooding Jr. has to like constantly stand up for him all the time. So it's really funny watching like Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character, who is like kind of a high society art dealer sort of guy, have to like try to stand up for Greg Kinnear because Greg Kinnear won't stand up for himself, while also maintaining like the very slick professional image that he has. But yeah, it's a solid movie. And then I watched Vengeance Is Mine, which I first heard about from you, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a solid, it's like a high witness, I would say. Like, it's interesting. My biggest beef with that movie is it's too long.
Yeah.
I feel like they could have shaved 30 minutes off of it, because like there's a lot of, like, the main character is interesting, and his like weird psychological fucked upness is interesting. Mm-hmm. As well as his like crime spree and how he's constantly like conning his way through life, or his life on the run. But I feel like there's just so much back and forth with him and like that one innkeeper, and there's just a lot of going in circles with all that subplot that I just kind of got bored. Towards the end.
I agree with you. Like, I think there's like a handful of scenes that I'm like, oh, that's crazy. I would say this though, like, I barely remember that movie. There's like 2 or 3 scenes that like are like blazoned in my brain, but other than that, I really wouldn't be able to tell you too much about that movie again.
It's funny because like you'd think a Japanese movie made in the 70s, I want to say.
I think that was the 80s.
Really? It was the 80s?
I think so.
1979.
Okay. So
okay.
Okay. Well, that explains it.
Yeah, you would think a movie called Vengeance is Mine about a serial killer made in Japan in the 1970s would be like this crazy, fascinating, like kind of crime drama. But yeah, it's actually, I don't know, it's not as good as it sounded to me.
Yeah,
when I first heard of it.
And you think like, oh, there's a Criterion version of it, and like, so it's got to have some sort of prestige around it, and you go and you watch it, and you're like, why is this movie so long? Why is it meandering?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, Shohei Imamura is considered he's like a prestige director, you know? Because I think it's like, he won the Golden Palm at Cannes twice.
Really?
And he's one of the only people in the world to ever have done that. Yeah, so, I mean, which is, in and of itself, is quite an accomplishment. And then, like, a lot of his movies are, you know, if you do watch a fair amount of Japanese movies, like, you'll probably recognize some names, like, what is it? Like The Insect Woman, The Man Vanishes, The Pornographers, The Eel, Black Rain, Ballad of Narayama. Like, I haven't seen any of those movies, but, like, I've heard all those names multiple times.
Right. Just
in, like, reading about Japanese cinema. But yeah, so it's I don't know. Vengeance is Mine was kind of a disappointment. I do like, I thought it was so weird at the end when the killer's dad and his ex-wife like throw his bones off the mountaintop or scatter his ashes, and then they keep throwing it into the air and just freeze frames, and they're like, what just happened? And they throw another one into the air and it freeze frames, and they're like, huh? And they just keep
throwing bones and it keeps freeze framing.
It keeps freeze framing, and it's like, you know, it's supposed to be like they're suspending in the air, but it's the way they do that is they freeze frame, and it's so bizarre.
I mean, yeah, Japanese cinema's weird. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it. Like, there's certain things about it that are like, oh yeah, it's cool and edgy and stuff, and then every now and then you're just like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Freeze
I mean,
frame.
I don't know. Going into this, I was hoping it would be like a Seijun Suzuki movie where it's just balls to the wall insanity.
Yeah, same.
But this is actually way more like kind of staid and
surprisingly tame,
respectable. Yeah, I mean, it feels more like a kind of a prestige movie, whereas, you know, like Branded to Kill is just kind of like some crazy old man's coked up fever dream.
Branded to Kill's amazing.
Branded to Kill is one of my favorite movies ever. Like, that movie's so good. I love everything about it.
It's so wild and it's just so out there. It's like, oh.
Yeah, I feel like my barometer for like what is a good Japanese crime movie is basically Branded to Kill. It's like, Because when I watch Tokyo Drifter, I'm like, oh, Tokyo Drifter's really good, but it's not Branded to Kill, or
It's not. Well, Branded to Kill is just so batshit insane too.
I know.
I think that's one of the appeals of it. Like I like how Tokyo Drifter is just so goofy, but Branded to Kill like takes that goofiness, amplifies it, and then puts a whole lot more like surrealism in it.
Definitely.
So that's.
But
yeah, no, Vengeance is Mine is not that at all.
No.
At all.
It also has some like neat cinematic stuff. Like, I mean, the opening sort of sequence where he's being driven around in police cars is pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. I was kind of disappointed. It's still like a Witness though.
Yeah. That's just it. It's like it's kind of like a James Mangold film. It's like solidly constructed, but like I said, I barely remember anything about it. And like I was so excited to watch it when I put it on too, and I probably sung its praise at the time, like, "Oh, this movie's so crazy and so different." Dude, I don't remember anything about that movie now. Not to get too far off topic, but as far as like Japanese crime movies go, like on one end you have Seijin Suzuki, which is like just surreal and batshit insane, and then like on the other end of the Japanese spectrum, in my mind, is Beat Kitano, or Beat Takeshi. There you go. Takeshi Kitano. His movies are like super depressing, super slow, super idiosyncratic. But it's like the exact opposite of Seijin Suzuki, which have like a ton of energy and like style. It's like have you seen anything by Kitano?
I haven't seen any of his movies. I mean, I've heard a lot about him.
Yeah.
Because he's like the king of Japanese gangster movies in like the 90s, you know.
Right.
But yeah, like what I've read of his stuff, it all seems very kind of melancholic.
It is. The first one I saw was I can't even remember the name of it. Oh, dang it. But I did see the one that won the Cannes, that like got him the prestige of like Japanese filmgoers who were like, oh, he's not just a comedian anymore, which was Hanabi, which was like fireworks. And that, you want to talk about like an artsy, pretentious movie, my God. Especially like the last half of the movie, it's almost like, is there actually anything happening here? But yeah, it's the best thing though is Takeshi Kitano in Ghost in the Shell is the only good thing about that movie. Like he didn't even bother to like learn English. All of his lines are in Japanese, and they just pretend like he's speaking English anyway. He goes in and blows everyone away.
That's amazing.
Let me see here. But yeah, have you watched anything else while I get this movie up on my?
Oh yeah, I watched all of Tiger King in one sitting.
Sonatine's the movie. Sonatine.
Oh, okay.
You watched all of Tiger King, huh?
Yep.
How was that?
It's pretty good. It's so like, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's like I had no interest in seeing it, but I was kind of strong-armed into watching it, and then ended up kind of enjoying it.
Right.
I think it's one of those things where it's like it's insanely popular, mainly because it, you know, we're all on lockdown because of coronavirus, and so everyone who doesn't have a hobby or a job is sitting in front of their TV. And, you know, the thing with Netflix is, like, whatever they put on their main banner is what everyone watches. Like, even if it's shit. And it's usually shit, like Bird Box or something.
Or the new Chris Hemsworth movie that's coming out that I'm hoping is good, but I don't have high hopes for.
I don't even know what that is, but okay. I know Mark Wahlberg had a movie on Netflix where he's like a corrupt Boston cop, which is every Mark Wahlberg movie.
And it's directed by Peter Berg, which is also every Mark Wahlberg movie.
I know. I feel like Mark Wahlberg can't be in something unless it's directed by Peter Berg now. I'm waiting for the Peter Berg cut of Boogie Nights at this point.
So I think, I don't know if you sent this to me or if I saw it on the internet, but someone was like, I can't wait for the coronavirus outbreak movie that's coming that's directed by Peter Berg starring Mark Wahlberg. Yeah,
I mean, that's true. Peter Berg is the king of...
And it's weird because those are the only like really good movies that Peter Berg has ever made have been based off of true stories.
Well, Peter Berg is the king of like capitalizing on some kind of like major true event tragedy, like way too soon after it happened. Like it's like, oh, remember the Boston bombing when like whatever 15 people got blown up? Peter Berg is making a movie like 9 months later about it. It's like, oh fuck, no.
He's also really bad about like burying the lead, because like I always think of like Lone Survivor. Like, gee, I wonder what's gonna happen. Starring Mark Wahlberg. Let me guess. There's like 8 people on that team. I haven't watched it, but I'm just gonna I'll throw it out there. I have a feeling like Mark Wahlberg's gonna survive, and if not, his sacrifice is gonna be the sacrifice that allows our main character to survive.
I know.
But anyway, Tiger King.
What is there to say about Tiger King?
Yeah.
I mean, Tiger King's interesting because it's like, you know, true crime documentaries are really popular on their own. Like they don't even need to be on the front page of Netflix for people to find them and watch them. They can be buried a little bit and people still seek them out. But this one, it's almost not even a true crime documentary until maybe halfway through. Because it's almost like a character study of eccentric people.
Right.
Which is what I liked about it. Because it's basically, it's funny, I think the guy who directed it, or the team that directed it, it's a man and a woman, I think they're from Florida. And one thing I've noticed is like, if you're a filmmaker, especially a documentarian from Florida, you tend to like gravitate towards making movies about how weird and fucked up Florida people are. Like, there's a guy named David, I think it's like David Corbett? Billy Corbin, sorry. Billy Corbin is, he's a Florida man. He's a Florida documentary filmmaker, and all his documentaries are about, like, Florida wackos. So, he did Cocaine Cowboys, about the Florida drug trade. He did Screwball, which is, like, 90% just shitting on Alex Rodriguez, who's another Florida whack job. So I feel like this is like some weird subgenre of American documentaries. It's like Florida documentarians who are like managed to rise above the Florida-ness of their upbringing and then document it.
I mean, Florida's like, having lived in Florida for almost a year.
Oh yeah, that's right. You are almost a honorary Florida man.
I lived there for a year, and Florida is, especially like the area I lived in, it is a very interesting place.
Exactly.
There's a reason why Florida Man is a meme, but also very true. Like,
yeah.
Like, Florida Man has transcended being onion fodder and has like actually gone into being like an honest living. So it doesn't surprise me that if you're competent enough to be to elevate yourself out of sort of like the weird Florida subcultures and the weird culture in general around Florida, it doesn't surprise me that you'd be able to find really interesting people who you might not want to ever like really meet or interact with. That's the thing about Tiger King, is I'm like I don't want to watch it while I eat, because it's just so there's something just like so like about it.
I know. Well, so I mean, the thing with Tiger King is like only one of those characters is from Florida, but they all fit the stereotype, you know.
Right.
That, you know, Florida man Florida man, while nude, fights off 3 cops with an alligator, like, or something. But
Florida man found dead inside tiger's mouth.
Yeah,
Only
exactly.
his ring and penis survive. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's always shit like that. But, you know, it's an interesting show just because it's the kind of material that would make for a great reality show. And it's funny because one of the characters is a reality show producer who tried to make a reality show out of Joe Exotic and his zoo, and then all his footage got burned in a fire, so he lost all of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it the guy who's like co-producing the Joe Exotic TV, or is it someone else?
Yeah, it's that guy. So
Okay.
He had a deal with Joe Exotic where he would produce Joe's internet show if he was allowed to film everything to make his own reality show about Joe. And I always remember that guy because he looks like a character from Kill Bill.
Yeah. He looks like
but-
one of the many Michael Parks cameos in Kill Bill.
I know, exactly. Well, he kind of looks like kind of a weird, like Southern David Carradine.
Yeah, he does.
But yeah, he had all this footage that he was gonna bring to a network to pitch the show, and the footage ended up getting burned in this huge fire. So, he left Joe's Zoo kind of in a rage after that. But yeah, so it's the kind of it's interesting because the show, for the most part, tries not to judge any of the characters. It just sort of is like, hey, look, everyone in this show is weird as hell.
Right.
I mean, they do kind of portray Doc Antle, who's that one big zoo owner in South Carolina.
Yeah.
They portray him in a pretty villainous manner, but, I think, Carol Baskin, her portrayal's very kind of two-sided, where she's allowed to speak for herself and she's portrayed very neutrally, but then at the same time, you're constantly hearing, everyone else talk bad about her and how she's a crook or how she murdered her husband or how she's, her sanctuary is really just another private zoo that's disguised as a sanctuary.
Right.
And then Joe Exotic himself is a really interesting and kind of weirdly sympathetic character because I read about him after watching the show, and his life was tremendously fucked up. He was a complete wreck by the time he started taking on these big cats. So it's interesting as a psychological study of this guy who was basically broken by life and then tried to reinvent himself as who he wanted to be after kind of discarding everything having to do with his old identity, because that had caused him so much suffering earlier in his life. So yeah, it's an interesting show. And then the true crime stuff does come in later, and that's also, reasonably interesting.
You have to have something to carry you from this is, you can't just focus on the people. You have to have some sort of through line for the rest of the audience to kind of grab onto and say oh, okay, yeah, I can handle this. I can watch this. Yeah, I can understand this better. So
yeah, exactly.
I understand why they have the quote unquote plot in there that they tease the end of every episode.
They do really have to push the plot later on, because it's you can't do it's hard to get away with a 5-hour character study for mainstream audiences, even though that's, I think, my favorite part of the show. And I actually kind of wish that they had done more of the character stuff and pushed the plot more to the periphery a little bit, but
right.
Oh well.
Yeah, but
I mean, because it's a very
but if
conventional.
They did Netflix, if they did that, no one's talking about it now. Everyone's just oh yeah, did you ever watch that boring Tiger King doc?
Exactly.
We'd be what do you mean boring? It's fascinating.
It fills all the conventions of kind of what we think of a modern docuseries to be. It's basically a freak show that's hey, look at all these crazy people. It's like Real Housewives, but worse. And then it's got the true crime bit, and every episode ends with a teaser for the next episode. And a lot of the cinematic techniques that they use are very, you see them in every documentary, especially every Netflix documentary, where they really bury the lead. There's a lot of slow motion shots of people just walking with their head held high, or just looking at the camera while someone else is narrating something maybe kind of sinister or whatever.
Dramatic rack focuses.
A lot of dramatic rack focuses. But the characters are kind of what make it work and what make it interesting. Because without that, because the plot of it is, it's pretty wild in terms of what you'd see in regular day-to-day life. But in terms of all the true crime shit that's happened in the world and all of the crazy shit that's happened in the world that there's, that you can read about online, the actual criminal activity these people are involved with is not that crazy or outlandish. I think it's more so everything that makes the show work is the people who are in it, the stars of the show.
Right.
And they're kind of weird. It's also kind of one of those weird hidden world type of things where it's under the nose of polite society, there's this subculture that spans a huge chunk of the United States that's full of like whack jobs. And everyone involved is, at the very least, slightly off, and at the very worst, completely insane.
That's
So
what
I think there's that
what
kind
I've
of allure
gotten
as
so far.
well, where it's like some industry or some subculture gets like the sex, drugs, and rock and roll and crime treatment. You know, it's like there was some TV show called Mozart in the Jungle, whereas it's like, hey, let's give classical music the sex, drug, and rock and roll treatment. You know. Make it like this seedy, grimy, drug party-filled, sexy thing. That's like ultra salacious, you know. So I feel like this is kind of like, hey, let's take some weird subject like private zoos and try and craft the most salacious, eye-catching program that we can out of it. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Louis Thoreau because he is, once again, proves to be way ahead of his time all the time. He's like a BBC documentary filmmaker who would make he had like some show where he would do like 20-minute or half-hour like travel documentaries. Mm-hmm. But they were always on weird subjects. Like him and Alex Jones infiltrated Bohemian Grove, where all the elites like party and do weird rituals and stuff. He did one on Scientology, and he did one on Joe Exotic like 10 years ago.
What?
Yeah, like he always manages to do like some little 30-minute BBC documentary, and then way later someone else makes a huge expose that gets really popular. And it's like, I feel like everyone in England knows who he is because like his stuff is on the BBC all the time, but I feel like no one in America knows who he is. Also, I've heard interviews with him, and he does an amazing Tom Cruise impression.
Well, that's it's the most important thing.
Yeah, well, because I mean, he did one on Scientology, so it helps. It helps to be able to mimic Tom Cruise. But yeah, Tiger King, it's pretty good. I understand. I definitely understand the hype and why people love this show.
That's interesting coming from, that's kind of surprising coming from you, because usually you're like, it's popular, but it's stupid. But this is like, I understand. There's actually something in that for me, which is I'm kind of surprised at. Like,
yeah, well, so here's one thing that is kind of interesting. You remember Not Your Average Joe, right?
Not Your Average Joe.
That little mockumentary from college?
Yes. I think so.
So,
yours, right?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
So
yeah.
I think part of what I like about Tiger King, and it's funny because the first episode of Tiger King is called Not Your Average Joe.
That was the make or break it. If you liked it, it was going to be great. If you didn't like it,
I know, that was going to be like,
you'd be like, this piece of shit copying my movie title. Yeah. Yeah, Not Your Average Joe. I remember that.
Even though I didn't come up with that movie title, it was someone else. It's interesting because both of those are a kind of story that I like, where it's someone who is so easy to ridicule, but they're so earnest in spite of their ridiculousness that you can't help but there's something kind of endearing about them.
Yeah.
Like, Joe the crazy method actor is laughable, but at the same time, to me anyway, he was kind of like, his commitment and his sincerity was endearing.
Right.
And I think Joe Exotic is also like completely ridiculous, but he's endearing even though he is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing I watched is I rewatched The Master, which is fucking amazing. One of the greatest movies ever. Not much to say about that. I thought of it because there's that question that Philip Seymour Hoffman asks during his the processing, where he's like, "Do you think God will save you from your own ridiculousness?" But I don't know. It just made talking about Tiger King made me think of that.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see how that is. That's interesting. I'll see if I can try and finish Tiger King. Like I said, I'm 2 episodes in. It is really good on that like sort of like primordial addicting level of like, wow, these people are crazy, but I need to see what happens next. I need to see what kind of crazy antics do they get into. So
I know. Yeah, it's interesting how, that style of basically it's the prestige television technique, where it's basically like you kind of take the act breaks that you used to have in like primetime television for commercials, and essentially just put that at the end of the episode. So every episode is kind of this slow build to, there's usually a climax towards the middle or like kind of 2/3 of the way in, then it slows down. And then the last maybe 5 or 10 minutes of your 45-minute or hour slot is spent building up the next episode. And then you cut it short so people have that like, oh no, I just got into this new subplot or whatever. I need to know what happens.
Right.
So it's crazy how like it seems almost scientific how it's become with, the writing for every TV show now, and I guess the editing for like docuseries, because you obviously can't write a documentary.
Right. Well, that's why docuseries to me are just kind of like a strange thing. Like, I didn't watch, what was it, that one about the guy who basically admitted on camera that he killed those people when he was like taking a piss or whatever.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember the name of that. It was on HBO.
Like, I watched that last episode and that last part, and it's like, wow, maybe I should go back and watch the rest of it. But like, also, I mean, and again, this is the part that always kind of gets me about docuseries is like people just like, if you don't know anything about documentary filmmaking, you take documentary filmmaking to be objective fact, when in reality documentary filmmaking is almost always a slanted point of view. It manipulates in the way that reality television show manipulates, but to a much lesser and less obvious degree. It's always kind of hard to take, I always take documentary filmmaking with a grain of salt, like, except for something
it's
like
also
the
like
Thin Blue Line, which was used as like court document proof that this guy confessed to the murder. It's like, oh, okay.
It's crazy. He confessed on camera in this documentary, and they're like, see, he did it.
They're like, oh no, we're gonna have to throw it out because there's too much dramatic reenactment of freaking milkshakes falling to the ground.
I know that the main reason why I had no interest in Tiger King is not necessarily because it's popular, but because I don't like documentaries very much. I think my impression of documentaries is they're all agenda driven. Like, they're always pushing you to think a certain way. They're always pushing a certain narrative, and it's very clear to see how they do that. I don't like the reenactments of anything, because it's just, again, more kind of dramatic, like, it's like a form of rhetoric, it's a way that the filmmakers are trying to shape your thinking about the subject.
Right.
And it feels very artificial, which I don't like. And there's always like a lot of selective editing. I mean, documentaries are very subjective, and they're very, they don't say everything. They always have an agenda. Even if, like in Tiger King, the agenda is really just to entertain. They're still they're taking active steps to shape the story, to not show it for what it is, but to show it in the most entertaining way possible, so that you want to keep watching.
Right. I actually like a lot of documentaries. I think I like them partially because of what you're talking about, but I like the ones that kind of deal with more obscure subject matter that I don't pay attention to. Now, with that said, I still haven't watched Icarus. I hear it's great, but like I watched ones based off of like animators' lives, like Floyd Norman, An Animated Life. Yeah, that definitely takes a point of view, but it did get a guy his job back, so... Well, not really a job, just kind of like a hangout. But like I tend to like documentaries that kind of show things that I wouldn't normally see, which might be why I never really got through the Thin Blue Line, because it's just like, this is what this is about, and you just watch...
It's fun that a lot of the tropes of modern documentary filmmaking were invented by the Thin Blue Line, which I think is why it's hard to watch now. Definitely.
Well, especially, like, I don't know if I've ever fully watched an Errol Morris documentary. But like, with the whole like, I'm speaking directly to the camera. This is the technique that put me on the map. But I did the one documentary. I know it took a stance, but I really liked was This Film Is Not Yet Rated. I thought that was fantastic.
Trying to think.
That's still like one of my favorite documentaries of all time.
I mean, the documentaries that I really like tend to be the ones that are more out there or more try to play with, how to do a documentary. Like I really like Waltz with Bashir, which is animated and surrealist, but also a documentary. Because it says its point really well, and it's a very interesting story, and it's also very gut wrenching. But because like at the very end it switches from animation to live action, and then it's like you see all this horrible shit, and you're like, oh my god. Because it's about the main character. The main character is also the director, and it's about him. He's got like amnesia during his time in the Israeli army, and he's trying to fill in the gaps that he's sort of lost during the Lebanon War. So like as he's going around interviewing people, well, the whole movie's animated, so like the interviews are animated, and then like there's like animated sequences of like what the people are describing to him, or like things as he kind of remembered them, and there's also like extended dream sequences and stuff. But it's really good. Or like
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool, and the way it kind of plays around with the documentary form is really cool. And then like I really love Grizzly Man, because again it's partly because of the main character. It's kind of similar Joe Exotic, where it's a guy who is laughably crazy but is also very sympathetic and endearing, because he's 100% committed to being who he is, and he just doesn't care what anyone thinks of him. And also because Werner Herzog is very, he tends to make documentaries as if they were like theatrical films. There's a lot of like intentional artifice and a lot of kind of poetic flights of fancy that he indulges in that are would be considered bad by normal documentary standards.
But he can get away with it because he's Werner Herzog.
But he can get away with it because it works. Like he makes it work.
The one thing that I find the most interesting about documentaries is how in like narrative movies, they try so hard to take like a real space and condense it into an hour and a half. And like a documentary can so easily tell someone's life story in 20 minutes. And and I think that's the reason why I don't like it when like a documentary is made into a theatrical film, because they're like, oh, well, we have to take all of these liberties to make sure that it works. And like the documentary already took liberties, but I find it fascinating how much you can condense time in a documentary with only a couple more different cinematic tricks than you can in a feature film, where it feels like you have to live with it moment by moment. I guess it's similar to like nonfiction writing versus fiction writing as well, but that's one of the reasons I like documentaries so much, because they can tell a much longer story over almost the exact same space and time.
Yeah, well, especially because they can bounce around in time at will, basically, without losing the audience. Whereas I feel like a narrative film would lose people pretty quickly if they played with the timeline as much as documentaries typically do. Yeah,
or presented it in a similar way as a documentary does, because there's a couple of movies that have that direct address to audience, and sometimes it works really well. Like, I'm surprising how well it worked in I, Tonya, but some other ones, you're like, oh god, Alpha Dog, what are you doing?
So what have you been watching lately?
I had to look back through my book, because I try and watch something pretty much every day or every other day, so there'd be a lot to cover, but I've forgotten most of it, so I'll just hit some of the highlights here. Did we talk about, last time we spoke, did I tell you that I think I watched Double Indemnity after we talked about The Apartment?
Oh, really?
Did we talk about that, Double Indemnity, at all?
No, I mean, we talked about it a little bit.
Okay. I rewatched Double Indemnity, and I remember you talked about it because when you watched it, you said that the lighting was really flat in the movie, you thought?
I remember it being very muddy.
Okay. I wonder if it was the transfer that you watched, because like I was watching it again, and I was like, my God, this movie's pretty great, because they do play a lot with some dramatic shadows and things like that. But like a little bit going back to what we were talking about before, it's fun watching Billy Wilder just like easily fit into a different genre that you wouldn't think he would fit into. Of course, he does this by adding a lot of his own personal elements. Like there's a character, one of the main characters played by Edward G. Robinson is kind of both the comedic relief, but also he's kind of like the most endearing character in the whole movie. But I was surprised at how much I liked it, because I hadn't seen it in like a couple of years. And it's surprising how well the movie still works. So even as ridiculous as it is, I remember when I watched it, someone was like, "What's a double indemnity clause?" And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't remember. And 30 minutes into the movie, they're like, "And luckily we can get him with the double indemnity clause. It'll double our pay." And I was like, "Oh, thank you, movie. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for holding my hand there." But it was fun going back and rewatching that after watching The Apartment, because it's always fun to watch a masterwork. So, and then I also watched a couple of animated movies. Rob, have you ever watched the Disney Robin Hood animated movie?
Oh, where they're like animals and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like one of my favorite movies as a kid.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You should watch it again.
Has not aged well, I assume.
A lot of those Disney movies from the 60s and 70s to me didn't age well. A lot of them directed by the same guy. That's where they have that video clip of like, "Oh, look, Disney animators, they're lazy. They just copy their own stuff."
Because they copy like Jungle Book into Robin Hood, right?
Right. Well, they have the dance from Aristocats into Robin Hood, Maid Marian's doing the dance. For the record, the animators would have much rather just animated it freehand than have to go back to like the old images and recopy them.
Yeah.
Let's just put that out there for the record for those poor animators who had to do what they didn't want to do. But a lot of them, we're going to get into it with pacing issues. That's what this episode is, pacing issues, the podcast.
I feel like this episode is pacing issues.
Yeah, this episode will have pacing issues as we talk about pacing issues. But yeah, that out of all of the Robin Hood movies I've watched, it's not the worst. Russell Crowe, Taron Egerton, but it's definitely like a good 4 or 5 tiers below my favorite ones, and it's rough and it's slow, and it's weird watching King John. Like, I don't know if it was meant to be like Freudian or funny, but like anytime they mention his mom or his
Freudian
brother,
King
he like
John.
starts sucking his thumb and pulling his
I
ear.
know.
Like, I don't get it. Yeah, it was fun. I actually had started it a couple years ago and tried to finish it, and like got like 15 minutes in, and I was like, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this. So I went back and rewatched it. And then I also watched The Prince of Egypt, starring Val Kilmer and Ralph Fiennes and Patrick Stewart, Michelle Pfeiffer, Jeffrey Katzenberg trying to outdo Disney. Did you ever see that?
I saw like maybe 20 minutes of it.
Okay. I think it holds up pretty well. Like I would rather watch that than Exodus, Gods and Kings, considering they tell the exact same story, and it's in a much smaller time. But it got me thinking about, because there's, not to get too religious on the podcast, but there's this moment where like Moses goes in and he's like, "Look at my God," and he throws his staff down and it turns into a steak. And then like the Egyptians are like, "Oh, well, look at our gods," and they like do something similar. And I was like, it really is amazing how thin the line between like how seriously I should take my religion is. I'm like, because I was watching a video about Evangelion, and the guy was like, yeah, the use of Christianity in Neon Genesis is similar to how in America we use Norse mythology. Yeah, it's not taken very seriously.
Okay,
yeah. So like now I feel bad because I look at a lot of like the religious movies through that lens, and I'm like, yeah. So, and then I rewatched The Prestige, which is still excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I still think it's probably my favorite Christopher Nolan film. I know a lot of people. Yeah, I know a lot of people who like The Dark Knight and a lot of people who like Inception. But The Prestige, I feel, is like the perfect synthesis of like having his ideas, building on his ideas, keeping his theme coherent throughout the entire movie, and still having that early cynicism that some of his first movies had. Like,
yeah.
Because like Memento ends in a very much like it ends in like a very big downer.
Mm-hmm.
The Following, if you've never seen Following, that's got a really wild ending. So like I feel like Prestige is kind of his last movie before he jumped to becoming like a big studio guy whose endings are like, as the movies go, his endings become less cynical or melancholy, because like you know, like the Inception ends with that sort of like the top is spinning, but you're like, oh well, maybe he's in the dream, maybe he's not, it's up for me to decide. So that like you could paint that as like, oh, it's actually a positive ending. And then Interstellar ends with him like flying off to find Anne Hathaway with like future tech.
Love transcends space and time, man.
I just quickly on Interstellar, like the thing I find about Interstellar is like the overall story is kind of whatever, but it has some incredible sequences that are just fantastic, that borrow heavily from documentary. But like the scene, the part where they have to realign with the with their interstellar spaceship, and like they have to go to like many G's above what any normal person would do in order to make sure that their spin is correct on the correct axis with the ship. That's still like an awesome scene. Or like when they go through the black hole the first time, but like the whole thing breaks down by the end, where he's just like, the one thing that is always constant is love. I'm like, is it? Is it really? But The Prestige has like all of the cynicism, but also you can see him coming into his own as a filmmaker, and it's got a lot of fun magic tricks in it. Not like magic tricks like what they're performing, but you know,
cinematic magic tricks.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
love The Prestige as well. I don't know if I would say it's my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, but I think it's pretty great.
I know a lot of people's go-to is The Dark Knight, because it's dark, it's cynical, it kind of reinvented how we view superhero movies as, you know, serious medium, until, you know, the Avengers came in and was like, no, it's not. But The Dark Knight doesn't have enough Christopher Nolan-y stuff in it for me. You know, there's no time manipulation really, except for, you know, Joker getting all of those bombs on the boats.
I was gonna say I think it still features Nolan's time obsession, but just in a slightly subdued way.
Yeah, and that's partly a slightly subdued way, but also it's not baked into the narrative. Like in a lot of the movies that I like, it's baked into it. So like in Memento, it's, you know, constantly going back and forth, playing with memory. Prestige, the movie builds upon the fact that it's told from their journals. And then in Inception, obviously you've got the time with like the levels of dreams. So that's what I mean by like baked into the narrative. Yeah.
The one thing that always weirded me out about The Prestige was, I think it's kind of a similar problem that I had with Interstellar, where it's like the whole movie seems to be going one way, and then like, you know, 2/3 of the way through, it turns into a completely different movie that feels out of sync with everything you've seen before. Like Interstellar, it's this very like, they go out of their way to make it as scientifically accurate as possible, and then he goes into the black hole, and all that scientific accuracy is just, never mind. We're done explaining science to you so that you believe this movie is scientifically accurate. Now, you know,
fifth-dimensional beings, dude. Fifth-dimensional
Matthew
beings.
McConaughey is in a quantum library that he built in the future when he became a fifth-dimensional being because of love or whatever. So The Prestige just kind of had that similar, like, wait, what? Moment where it's like, it's a movie that's very much about, like, deception and showmanship, and they have all these, really cool magic tricks that always have some sort of trickery to explain how they work. And then, like, 2/3 of the way through, David Bowie gives Hugh Jackman
and grants his magic.
Yeah, David Bowie gives Hugh Jackman a cloning machine, and then it's just Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, it's it's funny because, like, to me, that movie, if it had one underlying theme, it was obsession, and how obsession escalates. Because, like, in the beginning,
that's definitely the main theme, I would say.
Yeah, but, like, in the beginning of the movie, Angier is like, it's like, oh, I just want to be a mage. I want to, be on the stage. And, like, by the end, you see him literally kill himself every single day because he's obsessed with being the best. Mm-hmm. So, like, I will happily take liberties with
Which is a great on-the-nose metaphor, but...
Yeah. It is, I'll take... And again, it's kind of the same with Interstellar, and even with Inception to a degree, where they're, like, going into, like, the furthest realm where they can never wake up. Like, and it's the same with Kojima's games. If you will build the reality of the world with science 80% of the way, I will take that last 20%. I will jump with you that last 20%, as ridiculous as it sounds. I'll happily do
I don't know, man. I think for me, it's like, if Interstellar wanted to do the crazy, like, black hole of love ending or whatever, they shouldn't have...
hole of a heart.
They shouldn't have made it... They shouldn't have stressed the scientific accuracy element so much earlier in the movie. Like, if they had been more loose with that, or even if it was very scientifically accurate, but they never bothered to explain anything, it's easier to accept that kind of an ending.
Well,
because I feel like that's kind of breaking its own rules. Whereas it's like, no one ever... I mean, it's a movie, so it's obviously a fantasy in some way or another, the way every movie, no matter how realistic, is a fantasy. But I think if you, through dialogue and through direction and through your plot choices, if you're constantly stressing how realistic your movie is, and then you break that realism, I think that's a bad choice, because that tends to pull me out of the movie, because it feels like the movie broke its own rules. Whereas it's like... I was having a conversation with someone about The Crow, and this guy was kind of lamenting the fact that superhero movies try to explain so much these days. Yeah. And he's like, it's a superhero movie. You shouldn't have to explain anything. Why does the Crow come back from the dead? Because love or whatever. Who cares? It's a fantasy. It's a movie. And I was thinking, like, yeah, that's right. In The Crow, they don't explain shit. It just is like, oh, he's back from the dead, I guess.
But I mean, that's the problem with, big word of the day, verisimilitude in your movies is like, it's fine in The Crow because they don't have to. The way that they construct the reality of their movie space, they don't have to. Like in Back to the Future, for example, they don't have to explain how the flux capacitor works because they're not going into like, oh yeah, and I have to, as long as I put in like 18, positively charged ions, which is a redundant statement, into the flux capacitor, I can blah, 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 blah. It's like, the less you explain, the less you feel it needs to be narratively consistent, but the more you explain. And that's...
Exactly.
And that is 100% Christopher Nolan's problem with his movies. Like, I was trying to... Like, someone was like, is Inception good? And I was like, yes, but it's a movie with a learning curve. And the learning curve is an hour where they explain how everything works.
It's not necessarily a movie with a learning curve. It's a movie with it's like a prep meeting beforehand, Yeah. It's like you're about to go skydiving, but before you can go skydiving, you have to sit through a training video, and like the guy who's going to take you up there is going to be like, all right, so this is the part of your parachute where you pull and blah, blah, blah. So you need all that before you can actually get to the movie proper. Right. But yeah, so that's kind of how I felt sort of thrown out of The Prestige in a way, because it's, all their magic tricks have some cool, interesting tricky, rational explanation. And then, it's like, how does Angiers do his transported man trick that's so impressive? It's like, they're building a clone army.
We are going to attack them with 5,000 hats. Yeah, I can understand that. The original book it's based off of is even wilder, because when he steps into the Tesla magical cloning machine, he doesn't actually get cloned. I believe he turns into like an astral projection. I was like, oh, because of the way energy moves and everything. So. Oh yeah, I think doesn't it like create a copy of him and transport his consciousness into the copy, and then like the one that's standing there is just like an empty doll or a zombie or something? Is that how it works? I don't know. I haven't read the book. I just read like a summary of like the differences, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I always thought it was just like a Hugh Jackman ghost with like no legs, just like floating around, like boo, but like getting more and more like making observations on life, like like maybe I should have tied her hands instead of her feet, because her hands are clearly more important to get free anyway. And her moved out, but I still think like the Prestige holds up. I don't have as big a problem with the clone army in the Prestige as much as I do with like, and I don't even have a problem with the interdimensional beings and the working in the fifth dimension, where they don't see time as a linear construct. They see it almost like as a three-dimensional video game. Like, I don't even have a problem with that. The fifth dimensional beings are just the Troglodytes from Slaughterhouse-5, except they're people. Except it's Matthew McConaughey instead of aliens. Well, yeah, that's which of course intrinsically makes it less interesting anytime it's Matthew McConaughey. Speaking of superhero movies that try not to explain too much, I ended up rewatching Captain America: The First Avenger again. Nice. Which also goes into pacing issues. Mm-hmm. And we can connect it to Peter Jackson through Hugo Weaving et al. Yeah. Sort of one last thing about superhero movies that explain too much. We were talking about The Dark Knight and Batman Begins and how those kind of... Our modern idea of like this gritty, grounded, realistic superhero movie comes from that. Right. And it's given rise to this weird trope of... that I hate. I hate this trope to death, where it's... The superhero and supervillain is always named by the media, So it's like Iron Man. No one ever says Iron Man. There's just a newspaper that's like, who is this Iron Man? Who is this Spider-Man? Or like Daredevil, the TV show, is really bad about it, where it's like, I'm the devil of Hell's Kitchen. And it's like, why is he called that? He's just a guy in a mask. And then somewhere along the line it gets changed to Daredevil, but no one ever says Daredevil. It's just whatever newspaper calling him the devil of Hell's Kitchen decides to call him Daredevil. Or like how Wilson Fisk starts calling himself the Kingpin in season 3 in like the dumbest way possible. I'm the Kingpin of crime. No, because it's like he's got a rivalry with some other dude in prison who's like, he's like, Wilson, you may have been a tough guy. You might have been the big man out on the street, but I'm the kingpin in here. And then Wilson like puts him in the hospital and is like, I'm the king. I am the kingpin now. I just cue to the animated cartoon. I'm the kingpin. Cue music. So it's like, I hate how all the superheroes and villains get their name through some weird like circuitous way because it's got to be realistic. But then if you look at Batman Begins, how does Batman get his name, or how do we first hear Batman? Christian Bale flies down on top of Falcone's car, punches through the roof, rips him out, and Falcone's like, who are you? Or no, he says, what are you? And then he just goes, I'm Batman. So even Mr. Gritty Realistic still has the superhero just name himself, which is how it should be. Like, it should be where, if a guy is dressing up in a costume to fight crime, he should come up with his own superhero name. It shouldn't be, that wouldn't be realistic if he came up with his own name. It's got to be some news reporter that comes up with it. I agree with you, but that's also, like, that was still when Batman movies and superhero movies in general were still kind of goofy. because like Batman Begins is pretty earnest for the most part, but there's still a fair amount of like superhero goofiness in it.
Definitely.
There's still a little bit too much David Goyer in that one, which is kind of why I like it. Like I kind of like the corny. I kind of like the corny superhero-y stuff, which is why I love
how Gotham is all like smoky and yellow too.
Yeah. It's all smoky, yellow, gross, grimy. It wasn't all Chicago as it is in.
It's not just Chicago in real life.
Yeah.
Because Batman Begins definitely feels like more of a fantasy, you know.
Yeah.
In the same way that like The Crow felt like a fantasy, I feel like there is this weird unacknowledged influence of The Crow on those Dark Knight movies. Because like Heath Ledger's Joker looks exactly like The Crow. Gotham City in Batman Begins looks like, I think it's Detroit in The Crow. So there's a lot of, interesting parallels, but
there were a number of lines in all of the Dark Knight movies that were like eerily similar to Roadhouse. I was like, what? Is he a fan? Because like Christopher Nolan's probably seen like a shit ton of incredibly shitty movies.
Eerily similar to Roadhouse, though.
Yeah, I know. I wouldn't be able to explain it, but like...
There's Alfred going around saying, I used to fuck guys like you in prison.
Nobody should. When I was in Burma, I used to fuck guys like you in prison. Like, yeah. Dude, Michael Caine, like... One last thing about The Prestige. Michael Caine can deliver exposition dialogue better than I think anyone else. Because he makes it sound like... It doesn't sound like lazy screenwriting. It sounds like he fully believes what he needs to say needs to be said. And that's a skill that not many actors have. Because there's a couple of times in The Prestige I'm like, he is literally just saying this so that we know. Like there's that line where it's like, will you stop kissing your wife on stage? And it's like, why would he use the language like that? Oh, I'll buy it. It communicates to me that they're married, so that's good. But just quickly on Captain America, the first Avenger, I feel kind of like it was a lot of fun watching it, especially I forgot there's a scene where they're like at the 1943 World Fair, and I was like, hey, that's cool. Joe Johnston has horrible pacing problems in all of his movies. Like Captain America, the first Avenger, is 2 hours long, and it feels like it's 2.5 hours. The last third of the movie feels so long for like him to not really defeat the Red Skull. Like it's really like it feels like the movie is so good for so much of it, and then because it has to tie into the rest of the Marvel universe, it just kind of doesn't have a good ending. It's just like it kind of ends. Even though the moment where he brings the thing into the water, I think is like really dramatic in the same way that it basically just copied Star Trek 2009. Where she's like, you better show up for this date, Steve. Like, I'm sorry, I'll be there as soon as I... And it just cuts off like a mid-line. I'm like, this feels familiar. Oh yeah, JJ did this already. It's still really effective because like it still works really well. But then like after that, when they revive him and everything, and it kind of goes into Ultimates 1.0, it's like, I could have done without that part. Like the rest of the core movie itself is pretty good, especially like the beginning section. The beginning and I think the middle section are really good of that movie. And I miss superhero movies like embracing how goofy and ridiculous they are. Like there's like a certain amount of like, I don't know, it's weird, but it's the same thing I get with like the first Thor movie where it's like these are fun movies. Like we know that they're movies. We're not tied down by like years of continuity at this point. You know, like all of the actors are there because they really want to be there and they're really having a good time and they really want to tell the story, you know, and it's fun. And I think the Marvel movies still have like a level of fun, but I feel like they're kind of losing the sort of tongue-in-cheek humor that even some of the Marvel comic books had before they got all super self-serious. So it's kind of fun watching that first phase of Marvel movies that are a little bit goofier.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, speaking of Hugo Weaving, let's talk about Bad Taste.
Which Hugo Weaving is not even in.
Right, he's not. Nor does he... Although given some of his recent like movie choices as bad guys, you could say that Hugo Weaving may have some bad taste when it comes to screenplays.
I gotta say, I do appreciate all of the food puns in Bad Taste. Like, apparently the name of the town is like some elaborate Maori wordplay.
Is it really?
Yeah. So, Bad Taste, for our audience, any audience members who don't know, it's Peter Jackson's first real movie, first feature, I think.
Yes.
And it's like ultra low budget, about aliens invading a New Zealand village to harvest humans for their intergalactic fast food franchise.
Which is brilliant.
And they're fought off by a 4-man paramilitary force called AIDS, the Astro Investigation and Defense Service.
Which is horrible.
Which is so bad.
It's so 80s, though. Like, only in the 80s could you really get away with that.
And yeah, it's so schlocky, but it's so good. But yeah, the town Kaihoro is it's from the Maori words kai, meaning food, and horo, which means town or village. But Food Town is also the name of a New Zealand grocery store chain. There's another like kind of dialect of Maori where kaihoro means greedy because kai means food and horo means quickly. And then also the transliteration of that is fast food, like food quickly, fast food. So great bit of indigenous New Zealand pun work by Peter Jackson.
I will say, like, just starting off, it's hard for me to take any movie that has a bunch of people talking in New Zealand accents. It's very hard for me to take it 100% seriously.
Oh, yeah. It's also hard to understand what they're saying.
Yeah. But kind of, we talked about it with Mad Max. I kind of like when they use their country's native slang because it makes it feel more like a real place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is sometimes hard to hear the actors or non-actors or whoever they are doing their dialogue in some of the scenes in the movie.
I know. Wait, did you know that the original Mad Max was, for the American release, was dubbed by American actors?
Yeah,
because they believed that the Australian accents were too outrageous for American audiences.
We've come a long way. I could see them doing that to this movie, or like how they renamed Brain Dead to Dead Alive. Like, I could see them going in and like redubbing everyone in that movie too.
I know.
Yeah, I love how this movie just basically, like, within the first, like, 3 minutes, like, some dude gets his head blown off.
I know.
You talked about this in, with, I believe it was Phantoms, but, like, I'm amazed at how, like, I'm still kind of perplexed at how he did some of the special effects in this movie.
I know. Well, it's like, I think Peter Jackson was the special effects supervisor for this as well.
Yeah, I believe so, because he used to do special effects in his free time in high school.
Yeah, it's like the amount of gore in this movie is nuts, and it's also like very high quality given how kind of shoddy a lot of the movie is, or like just low budget.
Yeah,
a lot of the movie is. I was kind of grossed out because I was thinking like, how much like raw meat did they have to buy to do a lot of these effects? Like anytime like Derek's brain falls out,
oh
and
my
like,
god,
put it back in. He's like stuffing some like chicken breast into his head or whatever.
Oh. That was to me like the most disgusting thing in the entire movie. Well, no, that wasn't the most disgusting thing. That was the second most disgusting thing in the movie for me.
Was the most disgusting thing where they all drank the barf?
Yep.
I
know, and it was, again, I get it. It looks super fake. Like when it's coming out of Peter Jackson's mouth, it looked like green slime, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's green slime. But then like they have a cut to it, and like they have like little pieces of carrots and peas and like chunks of bread in it, and like
it looks
I was
like they had Lucky Charms in there too.
Oh, I was like, oh, that's so gross. And like they would cut to the guy who was holding the bowl, and the bowl would be steaming. And I was just
yeah,
this is so gross. And like all of like you would hear them eat it, and then you'd hear like little puke sounds. And I was like, this is in very bad taste, Peter Jackson. But it was so funny. Like there were a lot of things like that where it drew the line between like, this is really disgusting and this is really hilarious.
I know. The other thing that's kind of off-putting about the movie is that I think a lot of the dialogue is dubbed. even if it's dubbed by the people playing those characters, like I think a lot of Peter Jackson's lines had to be dubbed, especially when he's on the cliff.
Yeah.
And then like the main villain, Lord Crumb, it's a different guy's voice speaking through that actor. So like all of his dialogue is dubbed, and it's weird because it's like that Italian spaghetti Western dubbing, but with Australia or New Zealand accents.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more off-putting. Also, I gotta say, I admire Peter Jackson's commitment to his performances in the movie, because he's like all thin and clean-shaven as Derek, and then he's like fat, bearded Peter Jackson that we all know and love as the alien Robert.
I know, I was thinking that too. Like, I also wonder how much of it was like Peter Jackson couldn't get his friends to film, so he had to put a lot of filler with Derek in. Because like a lot of what Derek does to me just feels like really long filler to get to the to get back to the action of the movie.
That's one of the main reasons why this movie is pacing issues, is because there's a lot of scenes of Derek like doing nothing, or like after he falls off the cliff, like his head the back of his head opens up and his brain falls out, and he's got to like put it back in and like tie his head back together with a belt. Which is so gross, but so funny.
It is. And it's like every time like that piece of his brain falls out, he like gets all like stupid and like drooly and stuff. And he's like, when he stepped on it and like lifted up his foot slowly, I was like, oh, poor guy. I
know. And the fact that they use like what looks like, pieces of chicken or something as his brain bits. So he's like stepping on actual meat, and you're like, that's so gross.
I bought it. I gave into the reality of it all, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's definitely his brain." But I was like, "That's not." I was also thinking, like, I don't know why I was thinking this, but I was like, "That's not how it works. If your pieces of your brain fall out and you put it back in your skull, you don't automatically get that back. This isn't like a video game."
Well, but again, we're speaking about movies that just don't bother explaining jack shit. Like, this is one of them.
They're just like, "Here's the situation. A bunch of guys got guns. The bad guys are shape-shifting aliens. We want to see a lot of gore. Go." Mm-hmm.
I know. And the other thing I love about this movie is like how they work around their lousy budget to pull off a lot of the cool special effects. Like, Derek stuffing his brain back into his head. It's always shot from one angle. So it's like you can use a prop and then like, have Peter Jackson's hand be there. And then, the cut back to Derek, the front of Derek's face, so he's like, that's his real head, or what else?
The ones I liked were like a lot of the cutaways, like you'd see someone about to get hit in the head with something, they'd cut to the person swinging it, and then you could clearly tell it was a dummy that got his head cut off. But even then, I was like, Jesus Christ, like how much did you have to build for this movie? Because there's a couple people that get like cut in half. There's a guy that gets thrown off of a cliff.
The hammer fight. There's all those because they're swinging around real sledgehammers, which is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Also, I will say what was pretty ballsy is in Bad Taste, there's a sledgehammer fight where they're swinging around real sledgehammers. In Vengeance is Mine, the killer kills a guy with a hammer, and you can tell it's a rubber hammer, because he's holding it so tightly in his hand that the handle is bending. So Peter Jackson did a hammer kill better than Shohei Imamura with a lower budget.
I guess they couldn't be bothered to have a better hammer on the movie. They had to spend too much on the actors.
I guess. But yeah, it's, like the hammer fight, like they really had to be careful how they cut that, because it is such a dangerous sequence to film. And Peter Jackson's the guy unarmed getting hammers swung at him, so he's ultra ballsy. Yeah, he does all kinds of crazy stunts. And then I love all the dummy shots in the movie of like dummies falling off of buildings and down cliffs and stuff. And I also like how when Derek falls off the cliff, they like contort the dummy into like this hunched over position. So that like it matches the cut of him falling. Yeah,
I know. I like that too, because like for a split second I was like, how did they do this? And I was like, oh, there's the dummy. Okay, I can see the dummy now. Like I actually, when Derek like splat on the ground there, I thought that was the end of Derek, and then he just kind of brought him back because he needed to fill the movie more stuff.
I know.
Because there's that huge blood splatter, and I was like, what the hell? I guess he's dead.
Yeah, I thought he exploded, like Mama at the end of Dread.
I was going to say, I thought he exploded like one does in, early Peter Jackson movies.
Oh, yeah, or just Peter Jackson movies in general.
There's a cut of The Lovely Bones where Saoirse Ronan's just blowing up.
She blows up like Ewan McGregor at the end of Harley Quinn.
They totally could have done that with Stanley Tucci at the end of The Lovely Bones, because they're like, the studio was like, we want you to kill him, like make it more vicious and violent. You just like says Stanley Tucci falling down, and it just cuts to bad taste of like the explosion of blood. I also love how like you can see the foundation of Peter Jackson as a filmmaker in Bad Taste. Like there's a lot of little moments that I was like, okay, I could see how like I can draw the line between Bad Taste and Lord of the Rings somehow. With like the way he does some of the stuff. Most of it's like with the camera work where it's all like wide angle lenses everywhere, which it's not everyone's favorite, but he does a good job.
He consistently breaks the 180-degree rule to the point where you don't know where anything is in orientation to anything else.
Oh yeah. Although that's another I'm amazed at how good his action scenes were. At like such a young age.
I know.
He was just like he's like, this is my bread and butter. Now I need to work on the drama stuff.
What's interesting is that like the dramatic stuff is shot almost incoherently, but the action scenes are all really well constructed.
It's true. It's like I feel bad because like the acting clearly isn't very good, and I'm wondering if how much of it was like, okay, originally it was going to be kind of like a more dramatic movie, but there's no way this was ever going to be like a really like dramatic or like dark zombie type movie. This was a comedy through and through from the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other thing is, the big shootout at the end, like it is surprisingly well done given, what the means they had and how inexperienced everyone was. Mm-hmm. But it is also way too long and drags like really badly towards the end.
You could say that about all the action scenes in the movie.
I don't know. I kind of felt like the earlier action sequences were pretty lengthy, but they never felt like they dragged it or sagged at any point. Whereas the big shootout at the end, I was like, all right, how many more aliens are they going to shoot? Like, come on. I also like how the plot has the shape-shifting aliens. Their human form is just they're like people with blue shirts. Again, like a little low budget trick,
So two things on that. The one about the ending action scene, I think the one nice thing about the earlier action scenes is that he kept either visual gags in or motivations in to make sure that it continued to be interesting. And in the ending action scene, it was more just like, all right, it's a shooting gallery. Let's just shoot everyone.
Yeah, because that's definitely how it felt. It felt like this big shooting gallery with the occasional like visual gag, like
because like
Derek's first
gunfight. Like I remember, I was like, okay, I need to bring this up because this is really funny. Because it's just like gag after gag after gag, and I was like, oh, that's actually pretty funny.
like where he's like kind of leaping back and forth over the fence, and the guys keep getting their sledgehammers caught in the fence.
Yeah,
like in the. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was going to say it's like the last fight scene kind of lacked that creativity until the end, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like he wanted to get it to 90 minutes while saving some of the best gags for the very end,
Right. Yeah.
Like, the ending is so good where Derek like cuts through the floor with a chainsaw and then falls right through the main alien to where he goes through the guy's head and out his butt, and he's like, "I'm born again."
It's such a oh my god.
And then he dresses up in the alien leader's skin, and as he goes to the alien planet with his chainsaw, "I'm coming, you bastards!"
Yeah, the movie comes full circle because the movie's about a bunch of aliens who are dressed up as humans, and then it ends with a human dressed up as an alien going to...
I was going to say, in the big shootout at the end, like there's that one really weird sequence where one of the guys is just like rolling back and forth on the ground while someone is shooting at him from a tree, and they keep missing. But the whole sequence just looks really bizarre because he's rolling back and forth, and there's like these optical printed like bullet hits on the ground next to him and stuff. And then like he shoots the tree and like 10 aliens fall out. So that's kind of how that's how a lot of that final shootout felt to me, where it was like, you know, it's just like weirdly overlong, inexplicable shooting gallery stuff with the occasional gag.
I agree. I'm just thinking about like that. Well, like that whole thing, or because like when you were talking about it, I was like, yeah, a lot of the end of that fight, the shootout does kind of blur together. I remember, and I also, like you said, I had no idea where. Well, one, I had a hard time telling who all the characters were. I was like, all right, that guy looks like that. This guy has long hair. Like, it's good that they all visually look different. But then when they put on all of their outfits that were bulky, like, I couldn't tell who the hell was who.
I know.
Sorry, I'm looking at a stat here. Craig Smith was part of the original cast and was married and then divorced within the 4-year time frame it took to make this movie. Because
it took 4 years to make this movie?
Because most of the filming took place on weekends. He found himself written out because his new wife objected to him working on Sundays. Smith was written back into the film when he finally got divorced.
Wait, who is this?
Craig Smith. I don't know who he played.
I think he's the priest.
No, because the priest. Let's see. Craig Smith. Giles. Dude, I don't know who any of the characters are.
So I know Barry is the guy at the very beginning with the Magnum.
Right.
Derek is, you know, we all know who Derek is.
We all know who Derek is.
And I think Ozzy and Frank are the two, like, metalheads.
Okay. Oh, so Craig Smith, was he the one, or was Giles the one who was captured and put in, like, the soup with, like, an apple clearly taped to his mouth?
Yeah, like, I think he's the bread collector guy with the pedo stash.
Okay. Yeah, and then he comes in for, like, the final shootout.
Yeah.
By the way, dude, like, I love the car with, like, the Beatles on them. I was like, what the hell?
I know. It's like, wait, what?
The props in this movie are amazing. I know Peter Jackson had to fabricate most of it himself. Apparently, a lot of the weapons were, like, World War II replicas and stuff. But, like,
yeah,
as I was looking at the weapons, I was like, these kind of look like toys.
Yeah, well, because I think the guns the main characters use are like Sten guns, which are like British World War II submachine guns.
Yeah, it would make sense. He's a huge like World War I, World War II guy, so it makes sense that, you know, you do that. But like, I love it, dude. I don't know how you felt. Like, as I was watching this, I was getting more and more energized to like make a really goofy, schlocky action movie.
I know, it's one of those things where it's like it made me want to get off my butt and make something again, because it's like one of the great things about this movie is like you can feel everyone's enthusiasm. Like they're all just having so much fun. Like this is what they love to do, and they wouldn't want to do anything else.
Obviously I don't see a lot of them as like recurring cast members in his movies. I think in the next couple movies he starts finding people who he, you know, starts inserting in everything. But like it does have that feel of like, you know, Peter Jackson's like, hey guys, I want to make a movie. Can you guys help out? And they're like, sure, yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then he also went to the New Zealand Film Commission and said, hey guys, I want to make a movie. Can you help out? And they're like, sure, here's $25,000.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, that's what I was, because I know he financed most of it, like he paid for it, a lot of it like out of his own pocket, which is why it took so long. He's probably like, oh, I ran out of money from a movie, gotta go work my job and get more money from a movie. But like, I'm wondering if like the money that he got at the end of the movie was for the big like spaceship scene, because I think I know how they might have done it, but I'm still not 100% sure. Like there's obviously like when they're all rolling around on the ground that's going in, like you can tell it's fake. But there are other things that I was like, I don't know how he did this. I don't know how he made like the side flaps bend in on the house. Did he just like make a model of the house, or
yeah, I kind of figured I figured they did a model house for when it transforms into the spaceship. And then I figured like when the house is sucking in the grass, they just had the guys lie down on some fake turf, and then like 3 people just pulled on it off camera.
That's what I guessed for that part. But like the house itself, I'm really fascinated about.
I know.
Let's see if there's any notes on it here. The movie was banned in the Australian state of Queensland in the 1990s. And that's what caused the Queensland Film Board of Review to be abandoned. It was already censored at the time that they displayed it. Let's see. So yeah, going back to what you were saying about the dialogue in the film, part of the footage had no sound with it because Peter Jackson filmed it on his own 16mm camera, so he didn't have a sound recorder for it.
So they did have to dub a lot of the dialogue.
Yeah, and then once he got approval for the film from the New Zealand Film Commission, he hired a sound camera. However, neither Jackson nor his crew were very skilled with sound recording, and most of the dialogue was unusable.
Okay, so yeah, that explains why a lot of the dialogue feels like Italian ADR.
Yep. Oh my God, there's a lot here. Okay, the shot of Robert vomiting in the bowl is not Peter Jackson, but a hand puppet of Robert. Peter cast his face in plaster, and it was made into a hand puppet. There was a funnel at the back of the puppet's head where the vomit had to be poured into. Dude, this is amazing. Oh my God. Let's see. I'm looking for...
It still amazes me that the freaking New Zealand Film Commission funded this movie.
I know. They
I
don't
feel
have
like
anything about the house.
Yeah, that's the real magic trick is the house. Because I cannot figure out how they did that. I just assume it's a model, but I don't know. Oh, dude. Yeah. Speaking of like janky, low budget special effects, I caught a bit of Goldfinger on TV. Oh my God, that movie's terrible. I forgot like how shitty it was.
James Bond Goldfinger.
Yeah, because I kind of remembered enjoying it as a kid, but then I'm watching it and like there's a scene where James Bond is talking to Auric, and they're both on a set of a house, and Auric is got the house behind him, which is like a wall or whatever.
Yeah.
And then James Bond has a projection of the outdoors, and then obvious studio lighting shining on him, and I'm like, good Lord, you seriously were too cheap to shoot this outside? Like, like what the hell?
Dude, it's so funny how so many movies have rear projection, and rear projection looks horrible. Like,
well, not only rear projection, but like nonsensical rear projection.
I know. Well, I would, if I had to venture a guess, this is only a guess. When they went to shoot that scene, it was raining because Pinewood Studio is in England.
Well, because it's always raining in England.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were just like, oh, well, maybe they'll be the best way.
And there's also like a lot of shots where there's like a model plane that's very clearly like a painted piece of wood on a rear projected sky, and there's like a string that it's hanging from, and you're like, Jesus Christ, people watched this?
Well, was I talking to you about how James Bond movies, like as soon as this era of big blockbusters and everything had to be a tentpole came to pass?
Yeah. We talked about it on the podcast. So they used to be kind of mid-budget schlock until maybe the Pierce Brosnan era. Then the budget started ramping up bit by bit.
Yeah. Daniel Craig is when it like took off as like, oh, James Bond is like really prestige-y, but like I'm watch some of the old Roger Moore ones where he's literally wearing like a J.C. Penney turtleneck as he's running around like doing stealth. It's like, God, I sometimes can't believe how long James Bond has survived being as ridiculously goofy as it is.
Yeah, because like the only real redeeming quality of Goldfinger is that Sean Connery, in spite of James Bond's kind of creepiness, is genuinely charming.
Yes.
The rest of the movie is just like, what in the hell? So it's just funny because like Bad Taste, is made for no money by people who didn't really know what they were doing, and it probably has better special effects than Goldfinger.
Well, they also had 20 years to improve a lot of those special effects too. Like even if it's schlocky, like that's why, you know, like everyone with After Effects who knows how to do a gunshot makes all of the gunshots in bad taste look horrible.
I know.
You know.
Like I love how they shake their machine guns like really hard to simulate recoil. And then like they even kind of play into that when Derek has his first gunfight with the aliens at the beginning. Like he shakes the machine gun to like fake out the alien, you know. Yeah. And then nothing changes, he just shakes it again, but now there's like optical printed gunshots on it.
It's weird because I don't exactly know where the line between like, okay, this is a gag that works, and this is, I need this movie to be 90 minutes. Like, it's such a fine line throughout the whole movie.
I know.
Where, like, there's obvious moments where you're like, okay, this is clearly, like, part of the plot, developing the plot. And then it's like, okay, well, these 8 shots of all the same thing are put in here for some reason. Like, the 8th time Derek loses brain matter, I was like, all right, come on. Although at the end when he puts in the alien brain matter into his own brain.
I know.
I was like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh. And then the opening of the movie is amazing too, where there's like the government agent or whatever who has like, he has like one finger on his hand, and then he has another hand that's a lighter. Yeah. And he lights a cigarette on the one finger with the hand lighter. And he's like calling the Queen. And the Queen's like, oh no, I'm sorry, we can't help you. And he's like, this is a job for real men. And then he hits a line on his phone that just says, the boys. And it's like all in shadow and super dramatic.
So like that.
I just love how he has a robot hand with one finger. It's a middle finger because everyone's always flipping the bird in this movie.
Right.
And the middle finger has a Band-Aid securing a cigarette to it. And then he's just got a plastic hand on the plastic hand, the middle finger is a lighter and lights a cigarette.
It's like, and it's so great because it's like, why did we go to so much trouble for this? Because it's worth it. It's hilarious.
Because it's fucking hilarious.
It's
and also it's funny how like people are so precious about the royal family and the Queen of England. And the very first like 10 seconds of the movie is some dude just shitting on the Queen.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of like the Commonwealth nations or whatever, like they definitely like to shit on the Queen as much as they can.
I know.
I'm pretty sure Canada's not too Queen friendly, nor is Australia. I'm pretty sure Australia, anytime they can, they like to have a good old jab at her.
Yeah.
I also like how in this movie, instead of like the aliens having weird alien names, they're just like really like normal
Robert.
New Zealandy English names. Like one of them's, oh, I'm Robert, you know, like I feel like that's a J.R.R. Tolkien thing with like the trolls, but I also feel like it's a very like New Zealand thing as well. All those third class aliens with like regular names. Like or like how one of the main aliens is just Robert. Like, okay. So that's another thing that I like about the movie. It's just like it has a lot of character. The movie has a lot of character.
Oh yeah.
So a couple of things that I found that I thought were funny. There's a line in here, and it reminded me of something else. There's a line in here that says, "There's no glowing fingers on these bastards," which is a reference to E.T.
Yep.
I thought that was funny. The guy at the beginning, his name is Goldfinger. And I think my favorite line in the movie is, "Those bastards have landed." Like, I think that's like the slogan for the AIDS team is like, like they all like get their guns together and they're like, "Those bastards have landed," and they go out to like kill them all. This movie is so fucking cool. Oh my god, this movie's way better than it has any right to be.
I know. It really is.
It's so weird how the line between like this movie is schlocky and unwatchable and like this movie is schlocky and it's brilliant is.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's like you would think that a movie like this would kind of fall into so bad it's good territory, but it doesn't. It's like genuinely really good.
Yeah.
It's so good in spite of it being kind of cheap and silly and having, like I said, dragging at various points and sometimes being hard to understand.
I just want to know why it works. Like, I'm sure part of it's the energy, but a lot of schlocky movies that are shot by their friends have that kind of schlocky energy, or have that kind of energy. But like, I mean, part of it's also just like Peter Jackson's foundation is really good. Like, if this is the movie that he started with, he has a very solid foundation of just how to tell a story. Even though one of the problems is that the movie drags a lot, and let me tell you, I feel like all of Peter Jackson's movies have pacing problems to some degree or another. People can complain about Lord of the Rings being like really long, and the end of Return of the King is really long. Like, there's one point. I would also say like his remake of King Kong does not need to be 3 hours, but it is. Why is it so fucking long? Like, he never quite got away from having pacing problems. That's one of the problems I had with The Lovely Bones, is I just feel like it's, for what it's trying to say, it takes so long to say it.
Mm-hmm.
All of the good and the bad, all in one movie as his foundation.
I mean, my problem with The Lovely Bones is that it's really schlocky for a movie that's supposed to be like pretty dark and serious.
Like, there's that scene in the beginning where like Mark Wahlberg is explaining his love of like ships and bottles, and like Saoirse Ronan's eyes are like darting back and forth. And I was like, oh, this is goofy. I'm guessing this is goofy because the rest of the movie is going to be really dramatic. And I don't know. I never really connected with the rest of that movie, which drove him to be like, I need to make another movie that makes money. Guillermo del Toro is off of the Hobbit movies. I'm going to do the Hobbit movies. I need to prove that I'm still a good director, damn it. It's funny because of all of the Lord of the Rings movies, Peter Jackson actually has quite a large filmography. Mm-hmm. Because if he didn't have those movies, he would not have that many movies under his belt.
I know. Yeah, because he's got Bad Taste, Brain Dead, The Frighteners,
Meet the
Feebles, Heavenly Creatures, King Kong, Lovely Bones. And then he's got 6 Lord of the Rings or Lord of the Rings related movies.
Mm-hmm. Like, that alone puts
so that basically doubled his filmography.
Yeah, pretty much. He has a movie called Forgotten Silver, which
That's a mockumentary about... I remember hearing about it somewhere. I can't remember where I first heard about it, but... Yeah, it's a mockumentary about like some pioneering New Zealand filmmaker who supposedly invented like a lot of modern cinema techniques. Obviously, it's all fake, but you know.
Right. But that's like the joke of it all. Well, the co-director of it, Costa Botes, or however his name is pronounced, he did these like behind the scenes Lord of the Rings documentaries called like The Making of Lord of the Rings, and whereas the behind the scenes features of the movie, the extended edition of the movies, are like really polished and don't show a lot of like the hard edges around how it's made, Costa Botes documentaries on those movies show just how rough a movie can be, because they have scenes of like early prelim shots of like Gandalf riding his horse, and like superimposed over it at like 50% opacity is like a gate that Gandalf is supposed to ride through. They show like scenes with the ring wraiths where like you can clearly see the guys' masks on, like the black masks that they wear, and it's just like, my God, like if you want to see a movie that totally peels back the curtain completely on how like these like works of art were made before the CG and special effects got in. Like, the Making of Lord of the Rings movies are really incredible to watch. Yeah, you know, as a fun little aside there.
It's also interesting that a guy who loves special effects and, you know, has so much experience in really good practical effects dove headfirst into CGI so much, you know, with his more recent movies.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons is, well, he founded Weta Digital. So he was like, if we need to get to the next level movie making wise in New Zealand, we need to start doing visual effects. And like through the Lord of the Rings movies, Weta Digital became this amazing thing. But if you go back and watch The Frighteners, like that's the thing that always amazes me about Peter Jackson is like I've seen The Frighteners and I've seen Heavenly Creatures. The jump between Heavenly Creatures and The Frighteners to Lord of the Rings is like leaps and bounds. And I mean, it's obviously part of it is like, you know, it took him 5 years or 7 years or whatever to actually get it started and going. But like he also employed different techniques. He got a new cinematographer, and then because the visual effects in The Frighteners are really bad. But like the Lord of the Rings movies, like all of a sudden he goes away from the super wide angle lenses for like the majority of his takes. They put a strong emphasis on like making sure the world is as detailed as possible, whereas that was definitely not the case with like Brain Dead, Heavenly Creatures, or The Frighteners. So it's really weird to see him take such a crazy huge leap from those early movies, and even from Bad Taste. Like I said, you can see some of the foundation in there. Yeah. But man, it's incredible how far he jumps. It's wild, man. I feel bad. Like that's all I can say. But you know, if you look at the progression of like Bad Taste to Brain Dead or Dead Alive, that makes sense. And then he gets married to Fran Walsh, and she's the one who is like, maybe you should branch out and do Heavenly Creatures. And he gets his first like taste of Oscar glory, I think, from that. If I'm not mistaken, because I think he won the Silver Lion for it. And it's funny because you can very easily see the beginnings of him as a prestige director in Heavenly Creatures, but it still has a good amount of that Brain Dead stuff in it too. It's really weird.
Wait, Heavenly Creatures has a good amount of Brain Dead stuff?
Yeah, not like violence wise, but like but kind of like tone wise, and like the way he lights things, the way that he stages his action, some of the like kind of weird visual effects and stuff. Because there's a surprising amount of special effects in a movie that's about two women who are plotting to kill someone. Yeah. So, I don't know. Peter Jackson's an interesting filmmaker. I don't know if he'll ever make the next Tintin movie that he's supposed to.
I don't know what the future holds for Peter Jackson, because I feel like, I mean, by all accounts, They Shall Not Grow Old is amazing.
My take on They Shall Not Grow Old is like the documentary itself is pretty incredible. The behind the scenes of how they made the documentary to me is even more interesting.
That seems to be the case with all of Peter Jackson's most recent work. Like the behind the scenes of The Hobbit is way better than The Hobbit.
Yeah, although I still have a soft spot for the Hobbit movies. I 100% agree with you. All of the emotion of the Hobbit movies are in the behind the scenes features. Like by far. I don't know. Like at one point he was supposed to direct a Halo movie because he's a big gamer. But that's when he was skinny.
Oh yeah, that's weird. He lost a ton of weight and then gained it all back.
He lost a ton of weight after Return of the King. Did King Kong. Did Lovely Bones. And then he had like a burst ulcer during the pre-production of the Hobbit movies or something like that. I forget exactly what. And so like when you the Hobbit behind the scenes, if you're watching the Hobbit behind the scenes features, they shot most of the movies in as much in order as they could. And so in the special features, you can see Peter Jackson get progressively fatter as the movies go.
Oh my gosh.
But I think it had to do with the surgery, the directing the movies, and all of the studio interference that was going on at the time. Yeah, I have no idea what his next project is, because it looks like he has a documentary coming out. In March, Disney announced that they had acquired the worldwide distribution rights to Jackson's documentaries, The Beatles Get Back. It's set to be released on September 4th, 2020, but we'll see if that happens, which is a documentary about making their final album, Let It Be. So, I mean, aside from producing, you know, Mortal Engines, which won't get a sequel, and apparently not doing the Tintin sequel, probably because what's his name, Jamie Bell, like, outgrew being Tintin. Like, I don't know what he's gonna do next. I guess he's just gonna be like Scorsese and do a bunch of documentaries. Scorsese and Cameron before him do a bunch of documentaries and then hopefully come out with a new movie that's gonna win, like.
Scorsese still makes narrative movies, though. He
does, and Scorsese never actually took a hiatus from making narrative movies to make documentaries. He just would do documentaries between his narrative movies.
Yeah, I feel like that's the same case with James Cameron. It just feels like he's on hiatus because it takes him 10 years to make one Avatar sequel or whatever.
I mean, it's not like he needs the money. Well, it wasn't even because after Titanic, between Titanic and Avatar, he made like 4 documentaries all about Titanic. Not the movie, but the boat.
The actual boat.
Yeah, and as he's like waiting for his movie, like the money to show up, I guess, and technology to catch up with him to Avatar. Like, Peter Jackson doesn't have there's no excuse for him not making a feature film. Like, what the hell, Peter Jackson? I want more of your stuff. Which actually brings me to another question. Where do you feel Peter Jackson is on, like, great directors?
Oh, that's a tough question.
It is. Because I go back and forth on this, and, like, I feel like he's gotten worse with time. Probably because, like, after Lord of the Rings, he made a fortune and, like, you know, has like 8 houses and like can do probably part of New Zealand he owns, or they'll make him king of New Zealand or something. But like I love his movies, but like I said, I feel like he has pacing problems in almost all of his movies. But I genuinely enjoyed. Well, I actually really like Bad Taste. I liked Brain Dead a lot. I like all the Lord of the Rings movies. I even like the Hobbit movies, but I don't like some of his newer stuff. Like, I'm okay on King Kong. I'm okay. I don't love The Lovely Bones. I'm just okay with it.
Yeah.
By the way, They Shall Not Grow Old has pacing problems. for the record. For the record.
Oh my goodness. Where does he fit in like the pantheon? I don't know. I think he's like he kind of reminds me of Francis Ford Coppola, but maybe like a tier below, because it's like the Lord of the Rings movies I think are perfect in every way. I think they're some of the greatest movies ever made. I really like Bad Taste. I haven't seen Brain Dead or Heavenly Creatures, but I feel like, you know, the Lord of the Rings was kind of like Coppola in the 70s. When he was on this incredible run where everything was a masterpiece, and then has never done really anything noteworthy since. And I don't think Peter Jackson has either. Or what he's done since Lord of the Rings is noteworthy for the wrong reasons. You know, King Kong was noteworthy because it was too long. Lovely Bones is noteworthy because it's, for such a serious and grim story, it is so schlocky. The Hobbit is, you know, well known for being bad.
Progressively worse as it goes. Although, again, I still enjoy them, but they're not like they're movies. They're not film, as it were. If you make the delineation like Spielberg does.
I mean, I don't even know what The Hobbit are. Like,
I know. I don't know why. For you, The Hobbit is shite.
It's just baffling. I mean, I like the first one is like decently fun. But then after that, I'm just like, what in the hell? And even then, like with the first one, it's like, I don't know why the first 40 minutes of the movie is the dwarves holding an unexpected party at Bilbo's house.
I love that.
Okay, talk about fucking pacing problems.
Wait. Yeah, oh God. The Hobbit movies, oh, they've got tons. Quick aside. So, yes, the Hobbit movies, yeah, clearly not great. However, they have very they have a very Peter Jackson-y, like, over-the-top violence in the last one, the special edition, which is why, like, the special edition was rated R, or the extended edition. Like, they
Battle of the Five Armies.
Yeah, Battle of the Five Armies,
Battle
the
of the
extended
Five
edition. Like,
Armies.
it starts with Galadriel literally blowing up an orc, and in the theatrical cut, it just cuts away as soon as she does the spell. But in the extended edition, you see, like, it just explode, like, guts and everything. It's great.
That would be interesting, like a brain dead hobbit.
It gets better. The dwarves have a contraption. It's like it's pulled by goats, and it's like a dwarven death cart. So, like, one of the dwarves is at the front manning the goats. There's another one with a repeating crossbow shooting people. The wheels have blades on them. And there's one moment where the thing goes up off of a rock, and the wheels get to the exact head level of a bunch of, like, orcs, and it just chops all of their heads off. It's amazing. It's like,
sounds so ridiculous.
It is, and it's like when I was watching that, I was like, oh, this is Peter Jackson letting loose after for so long not being able to let loose in these movies. So, like, for those things are great, and it's only one sequence, and it's a lot of fun. But, like, again, after that, it's, you know, you still have to deal with, like, all of the problems that come with, like, you know, interracial erotica between dwarves and elves, and too much Orlando Bloom, and why does the headmaster have a sniveling bad guy who looks just like Grima Wormtongue but is like 1,000% less interesting? Like, oh god. Anyway, but yeah, the Hobbit movies. I feel like it was a lot of, like, studio pressure to make them actively less good. Mm-hmm. But now that I've derailed your entire point. Yes.
I don't even remember what my point was. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Peter Jackson, I think, will always be, like, up there because of the Lord of the Rings movies and because he has made other quite good movies as well. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I think he is kind of that Francis Ford Coppola sort of a mystery where he seemed to capture lightning in a bottle and then has been paying for it the rest of his career.
Which is probably why he's, like, regressed into doing, you know, prestige-y documentaries, and you would think that at this point he could just do passion projects, but
you'd think you would also think George Lucas would have been able to do any one of these passion projects he would always talk about.
Yeah,
he just went back for, well, let's what if we make Star Wars, but it's really just for kids. There's nothing for adults to enjoy except the fact that it's really slow and they talk about economics.
They talk about bad economic principles and trade federation and galactic interfering. I'll say, as a quick aside on the prequels, I think that George Lucas also felt pressure from all of the books that had come out to make his movies feel more like for adults, in that sense of, like, ooh, the politics, like, underlying the actual plot of the movie.
Maybe. I think he also just had stuff he wanted to say politically that he didn't really say in the original trilogy because he was more focused on, like, I got to make these movies a hit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, clearly he was not concerned about making episode 1, 2, and 3 a hit.
No. He's like, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. I'm so freaking rich, I don't care.
Are you giving me a blank check? Okay.
It's funny because that's kind of how he talks.
I know. Like, squeezing words out through, like, that giant thing that's growing on his neck.
So there's an old field of pseudoscience called physiognomy, which is the idea that you can determine someone's moral character from their facial structure. And, you know, obviously it's bullshit, but I still believe that, like, in my own weird superstitious way, you can't trust anyone with, like, a weak chin. You know what I mean? Like, if you watch Tiger King, everyone with a weak chin, like a chin that just goes straight into their neck, they're all, like, they're all crooked and evil and corrupt. And then I feel like as George Lucas has gotten older, his chin has slowly disappeared into his neck. As his movies have gotten shittier, he's become more two-faced in the things that he says.
Oh my god. The Gabe principle of the Gabe weak chin theory of interpersonal relationships.
I don't know what it is, but it's like anytime I see a dude with a weak chin, I'm like, I don't know if I can trust you, man. I don't know if you're gonna stab me in the back or what.
Oh man. Well, that's why you trust Superman, and in certain versions you definitely don't trust Lex Luthor, weak-chinned Lex Luthor.
I know.
It's just George Lucas but bald. With all that said, I actually have a lot of respect for George Lucas. Like let's not. The fact that he created his own post-production studio up in like Modesto or wherever Skywalker Ranch is, and like that it continues to still be top of the line is still pretty incredible.
No, I want George Lucas to come back and make a movie that's good. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't need to be Star Wars. Just something.
You mean Red Tails wasn't good, or that other one, that CG animated like magical things or whatever?
Well, I mean, the thing with him is because he doesn't direct anymore. He produces stuff because I think that's the role he was always most comfortable with, producing and editing.
Strange magic. Yeah. Especially agree, especially with editing.
Because his directorial style is very just sort of blank and ripping shots from like Coppola and Kurosawa. Mm-hmm. But, like, I feel like that style could work for certain subjects, and I feel like if it's something he really cares about, like, he could make something really good, and I don't know, I want him to, I mean, he obviously has no motivation to, because he's worth like $5 billion.
Right.
But, or whatever Disney paid him to go away, but, it
Even
would be
on top
nice
of that,
to see some sort of, like, I don't know, American Graffiti type of movie from him.
Yeah.
Because, like, the bits and pieces I've seen of American Graffiti are actually really good. And it is one of those movies that, like, I don't know, I think his sort of very conservative, just lock the camera down on a tripod and let the scene sort of breathe style works really well because, American Graffiti is a movie about teenagers trying to find something to do. Which is most of your life as a teenager. It's like, hey, it's Saturday night. What are we going to do? I don't know. Let's figure it out. Hop in a car and drive. And that's kind of, from what I've seen of the movie, that's kind of how it is. And it actually works really well.
Yeah. I always felt like American Graffiti was, like, it's kind of verite-ish, but I always felt it was like George Lucas's, like, new wave film. Like, because it feels... It's weird that it feels kind of like inspired by French New Wave, but like nothing really happens. The camera goes from like mainly locked down or handheld. It feels very like gritty and realistic. I agree with you. That's why I don't know if we were talking about it too much, but like I felt like George Lucas never had a visual style because like THX 1138. Visually completely different than American Graffiti, very different than Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so like I think he was much more comfortable on the editing end, even to the degree that like products he produced, he would also go in and like muck around in the editing. Even though
it's also like with Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, I mean, he was more comfortable being producer for those movies because he could he could direct the director, he could direct the writers, and he could direct the edit. Yep. But he didn't really want to be super hands-on in the actual filming of the movie.
Right. Like, he didn't want to work with actors, which I get it. Like, apparently Hitchcock, horrible with working with actors as well. But Hitchcock had a very strong visual style, and I don't think George Lucas does. And like I was gonna say about editing, like he clearly likes to edit, but a lot of people believe that Marcia Lucas saved the editing in Star Wars, and I feel bad because no one really talks about Marcia Lucas, but like she was for a lot. She, especially in the 70s, she was an incredible editor. She cut a lot of she helped cut Taxi Driver together and worked with Scorsese for a couple of movies. And it's kind of sad, like she never really got the respect she deserved as an editor. And I think she after she divorced George Lucas, she married someone else and retired. But like to me, it's always kind of sad that like, because she edited Star Wars, I think she did Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, parts of it here and there.
Yeah, she edited THX 1138. American Graffiti, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver, New York, New York, Star Wars, and Return of the Jedi.
And then she's just gone.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Marcia Lucas, come back to editing. But like, at least Peter Jackson, in comparison to someone like George Lucas, Peter Jackson has a very clear editing style, and it seems like a lot of his sets are fun. And like, you
except
know,
for The Hobbit.
Well, apparently the Hobbit set was pretty fun too. Like, there was a lot of joking around. It got worse as it went, but like, you know, Peter Jackson definitely embraced his sort of like, I am a schoolboy, I get to joke around with you, like playing pranks and stuff a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it would be fun to see Peter Jackson direct another movie. I feel like he's probably, I'd probably put him ahead of J.J. Abrams as far as like great directors. A couple of tiers.
Yeah, obviously. That's not even a question.
I feel like J.J. Abrams is actually a pretty competent director.
Well, but that's it. He's very competent, and that's it. Like, I don't see J.J. Abrams as anything beyond a very competent director. Like, his movies are all, I like most, if not all of his movies. I don't love any of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. Just whereas like with Peter Jackson, I'm trying to think because I'm looking at my list of like I have a shelf of movies and I'm looking at my movies. I'm trying to slot Peter Jackson in there, like because I legitimately think he's a great director.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know where I would put
like
him.
I said, he's kind of like Coppola, but maybe a little bit below Coppola, kind of around there.
Maybe because it was like I experienced Peter Jackson in my lifetime, whereas the best experiences of Coppola are in film history in the past.
Yeah.
That like if Peter Jackson has a new project, I'm much more interested in taking a look at it than if like, you know, Coppola comes out with his next weird $3 million movie starring Vincent Gallo or whatever.
It's weird because I think Coppola is so far removed from his prime. It's hard to get excited about the stuff that he does.
Yeah.
Whereas
well,
we can remember Peter Jackson's prime.
Yeah. Well, and even when he like, I wouldn't say that the Hobbit movies are unwatchable. Like they're not good, but I'm
Battle of the Five Armies is unwatchable.
I think I saw that thing like 3 times in theaters.
What? How? How did you spend money on that 3 times?
I know. I
was
don't know.
in pain watching that movie. I wanted to, like, when I got out of the theater, I'm like, oh, thank God that's over. That was so bad.
Well, one of the things was like I had to see it in high frame rate, 48 frames a second.
I literally got like a shiver went down my spine when you said that. Because
I had heard that the first Hobbit movie got horrible reviews, and so I was like, I don't have any interest in watching it. And then my brother was like, dude, the first Hobbit movie's awesome, you should see it. And I was like, all right, I'll go. And again, clearly not as good as Lord of the Rings, and again, clearly banked more on nostalgia than anything. But like, I was able to distance myself from it, where I was like, oh, okay, this is a movie that's, you know, capital N, capital V, capital G, not very good, but like I can still enjoy it. I can get some enjoyment out of it. And so at that point, they didn't become like, oh, Lord of the Rings light to me. They just became like generic fantasy movies that aren't as good as they should be. There's a lot. Guess what? There's a lot of generic fantasy movies that aren't very good. Luckily, Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit movies are like a little bit better than a lot of them. So, like, I didn't have to sit through like Dragonheart or whatever. Although it's got its own redeeming qualities. Sean Connery, who was supposed to play Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, but turned it down because he just didn't get it.
Wait, who was supposed to play Gandalf in Lord of the Rings?
Sean Connery was offered Gandalf in Lord of the Rings.
Whoa, that would have been something else.
I know, just it's just a good
Wizard is never
good
late, nor is he early, but he always arrives precisely when he means to.
I wish the ring had never come to me, Gandalf. Show to all who live to see such days. Bollocks up and get going. I have a game of golf I have to get to.
Is this what you think of me? Some conjurer of cheap tricks? I'm not trying to rob you. I'm trying to help you.
Oh my god. Like, don't get me wrong. Ian McKellen, great Gandalf. I love him. I would never want to replace him. However, there is a world where Sean Connery is Gandalf. And I wouldn't be lying if I didn't say that I would love to see a cut of that.
Oh my god. Or at least a screen test or something.
Oh, so good.
Show to all who live to see such times.
Gandalf? Yes, that's what they used to call me. Gandalf the White, or Gandalf the Grey. But now I'm Gandalf the White. So stop your fretting, Master Dwarf. Oh, God, that would be amazing. Imagine every time he just looks at him, you fool of a toque. Like every time. Oh, man.
Fly, you fools.
Like, it's weird that he turned it down, because that was like the perfect time to ask him, because he was already in Dragonheart. Mm-hmm. He was going to do the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen a couple of years later.
Yeah.
Like, it's still funny that he turned it down. I guess 2 years of his life was too much to devote to one project.
I guess. I don't know. But, dude, Sean Connery as Gandalf sounds like such a head trip.
There's a lot of like weird choices that if the movies had gone in just a slightly different direction, like who knows what would have happened. Like if it stayed with Miramax and they stuck it to a 2-movie deal, and like Peter Jackson is finished cutting the movie and he sends it over to Harvey Weinstein, and Weinstein's just like, we need to edit another 20 minutes out of this piece of shit, and like fucking sends it to all of the things for like an Academy Award, like the For Your Consideration campaign, where like Liv Tyler, who's in 15 minutes of the movie, is like, isn't this movie great? And you can see my boobs. God. It's so weird. So many little things that could happen that could have made the movie so bad. Like if they stuck to the original design of Gollum and like didn't use the back of Peter Jackson's feet for his skin texture. Like Gollum revolutionized the way that people painted CG characters to make them look realistic. Oh my god, so many little things. I guess it's that point. Any last thoughts on Bad Taste, aside from the fact that like the name is both indicative of the movie, as it is a movie that has a lot of things that are bad taste, but also it's a movie about fast food industry eating things that have bad taste?
No, I mean it's really enjoyable. It's such a good like schlocky action comedy.
It is. It's really good.
And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, is it like so bad it's good? It's like, no, it's really good.
It's
in
actually
spite of
good.
Being bad.
Yeah, like I can see why the New Zealand Film Commission, if they had seen like just like a bit of a rough cut of some of the scenes, I can see why they would give him money for it.
I know. The New Zealand Film Commission are the real heroes here, because they throw money behind the craziest stuff. Like they funded Bad Taste. Like, didn't they fund Deathgasm?
Did they? They might have.
I'm pretty sure they did.
Let's see here. Let me see if I can find
Yeah, the
it.
New Zealand Film Commission produced Deathgasm.
What?
Yeah.
Like who? I know that the New Zealand Film Commission is kind of getting into hot water because of the stuff with like the Hobbit Act or whatever, where like a certain percentage of the crew had to be. I don't exactly remember what it is, but like it was something where it pretty much killed the filmmaking in New Zealand. I'll make sure in the show notes to put a link to it. There's like a really good. I don't know if you've seen the trilogy of videos that.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Okay, so I'll put a link to that for anyone who's listening. Hugo Award nominated videos, I should say. But like it talks about how there was like the Hobbit Act that basically derailed independent filmmaking in New Zealand for like a lot of people, which is weird because like I believe What We Do in the Shadows was an independent film from New Zealand.
Yeah. But was the Film Commission behind that, or was that some other group of politicians? Because the New Zealand Film Commission seems incredibly supportive of like bizarro independent movies.
I don't know if the law worked counterintuitive to the New Zealand Film Commission. I don't really know. I don't know a lot about it, and it's probably worth looking up and like researching, but I'm not going to do that. Let's be honest. I don't know. I genuinely am kind of curious about that now, because like you said, like especially if they're funding really weird movies. I don't know. I'm kind of a fan of the New Zealand Film Commission.
Yeah, I'll say. It's also funny that like both the Australian Film Commission and New Zealand Film Commission are like very supportive of their local talent, you know? But it's interesting that like every Australian movie is this bleak, depressing, like misery porn movie. And then every New Zealand movie we seem to find is like this zany, over-the-top, like comedy with maybe like over-the-top comedic violence as well. Because it's like compare The Rover and like Animal Kingdom and Snowtown to like What We Do in the Shadows, Eagle versus Shark. Bad Taste, Deathgasm.
It's true.
It just furthers the weird dichotomy that like in Australia everything's just trying to kill you. Like 80% of the country's uninhabited because it's so hostile to human life. Like there's all these like crazy things that happen there, and then New Zealand there's like everything's perfect. There's no natural predators. Like everyone's just happy all the time. Like all their movies are just these silly comedies.
They have like a really sick sense of it, like reflects their sense of humor.
Yeah,
it's got like really like over the top. I'm actually on the New Zealand Film Commission's website right now. But on as far as film commissions, it's also also keep in mind that the majority of David Cronenberg's movies are funded by Canada. They're funded by I think their own film commission, the Canadian Film Commission. Like they kept giving him more and more money for his movies.
It's interesting because I think, you know, the United States is one of the few countries that just does not support filmmaking at all.
Right. It doesn't, or
because
at least the United States government doesn't.
Yeah, well, because it's like, oh, it's Hollywood, you know, it's all corporate here. Whereas everywhere else, like, there's a huge concerted effort to support independently made movies within the country, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas here there's like genuine contempt for supporting the arts. It's like, how dare you support the arts? Like, we should be supporting, I don't know,
we should put more of that money
wars
in
the Middle East.
Military.
It's like, why are you supporting the arts? We need that money to provoke Iran so we can have a war and take their oil.
Yeah. Whereas like in that same state or in that same country that we're trying to get like oil out of, they're like, oh yeah, and let's give a couple of filmmakers some money to make a movie. Oh hey, Brain Dead also Also funded by the New Zealand Film Commission. It's amazing.
Exactly.
It's amazing. I think the word I would use, though, to describe what the New Zealand Film Commission funds is diverse, to put it lightly. You can actually go on their website and see everything that they have, plug. You can go on to nzfilm.co.nz, and you can actually see all of the movies that they have supported all the way back since 1976 at the very least. They have 2 movies on here that do not have years. So 1976. Wow. See every single movie that the New Zealand Film Commission has supported, which is pretty crazy. It accounts to about more than 650 New Zealand shorts and features, which is actually not that much. So, never mind. Including Guns Akimbo, by the way.
Ooh. That seems like a very New Zealand movie.
It does. Starring Daniel Radcliffe, hopefully doing a New Zealand accent. So good on you, New Zealand. Keep up the good work of finding really random movies to flood money into. Or at least give some money to.
I know. I feel like, I don't know, there's all these people who say, like, oh, the world is a horrible place. Like, you need to get out of here with all your utopian ideals. And then there's just New Zealand, which anytime I read or hear anything about New Zealand makes it seem like some kind of utopia.
We should do an Under the Wheels Investigates and just go to New Zealand and see if it's true or if it's all false.
Is New Zealand really paradise on Earth, or have we been fooled?
I mean, I'll say this: the Hobbit behind the scenes features make it seem like it's the best place to work in the world. Mm-hmm. Not that they have any sort of hidden agenda.
I know. Well, clearly, they have their share of corrupt politicians who screw over people in favor of, wealthy foreign special interests, in this case, American special interests.
Yeah.
So, obviously nothing's perfect, but still, it's just like anytime I hear about New Zealand, it's like, you know what place is like perfect in every way? New Zealand. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't say I've heard similar things, and like, yeah. And plus the water is like really beautiful, so there you go.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you mean, the color of the water, is that really that important? I don't know.
Also, I like how in Bad Taste they're talking about how like the aliens could spread to larger towns, Yeah. And it's like, or, they could spread to other towns, or blah blah blah, or even Auckland. And then one of the guys is like, well, no, that wouldn't be so bad.
Oh, New Zealand and Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson from the Under the Wheel guys, please come out with another narrative feature, because at least one of us will be interested in it. My plea to you. Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts on Bad Taste?
Nope. I would give it. Oh, what are our ratings?
Yeah, that's an excellent final thought to go out on. Do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
I give it a witness.
I give it a witness as well. Wow, dude, we're so lame.
I know.
It's, what's funny though is like I give it a witness now, but I wonder if I think about it more and more, if like it'll just like increase more and more, because it's a solid witness. It's fun to look at it and see like this is the foundation that Peter Jackson will build upon through the next like 20 years, or 87, 2007,
however many years.
And like it's got a lot of like fun stuff in it, but it's also and like it's cool because it's also super inspiring, because it's like, oh, he made it over 4 years, but he made what he really wanted to make. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for those like in Dragon's Den and or Shark Tank, for those reasons, I give it a witness.
Yeah, shoot. Remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Make sure to rate and leave a review. You can follow us on Facebook, and our website is underthewheels.wixsite.com/blog. Special thanks to Mike Foster for our theme music.
Email us.
Email us underthewheelspodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, suggestions. We're always happy to listen.
Yeah, watch parties. We're running. We need more ideas during the quarantine for things to watch. I mean, we kind of do. Like, I'm sure we can like find something. You've done a pretty good job so far finding stuff. But yeah, those are excellent plugs. I was going to try and tie it into bad taste, but I don't think that was needed. I think you approached it perfectly. Well, that was bad taste. We just threw a lot of bad taste under the wheels. I'm done with it. I'm done with the tie-ins there, right? I swear I'm done. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And you've just been under the wheels.
I had to push for the finish there because I'm like on 1 bar of battery.
Oh shit, okay. Oh hey, yeah, I'm on 2 still.
Oh wait, you asked me to send you a picture of the audio recorder I was using. I forgot to send that to you.
Oh yeah, send it to me. I think I know which one you have though.
I feel like you would know. Without even having to look, you would know. You just
I'm actually thinking of getting a USB mic to have on my desk, but I'm not sure if my computer can handle like I'm thinking of recording it into Audition, into Audition directly, but I'm not sure. I kind of like having the backup of the audio recorder, like doing it via either my shotgun mic or my lapel mic. But I was like, do I really need to buy another microphone?
Yeah.
You know, they're not cheap, but they last forever.
I don't know. I'm pretty content with what I got.
You have your setup. You like your setup? Oh, that's different than the one I thought you had.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought you had the little skinny one, that's like a really skinny one. Oh.
This one's a little beefier. It's not quite Austin's monstrosity, but...
Yeah. Yours is actually kind of similar to mine. I kind of wish I had gone and bought the one that Austin has, because it's got, because I could plug it in and record instead of having to like buy a bunch of batteries.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
But you know, though, like I want to go through the whole gamut. Like I want to buy a new audio recorder. I want to buy this. I want to buy that. I'm like, no, don't. Everything I have is perfect. It's great. I don't need to. I really don't. It's fine.
It's funny how we sucker ourselves into buying like just shit we don't need or thinking that we need to buy shit.
What do you think, Minister?
Call a full-scale invasion of that, sir. I'll phone the forces, fighters, frigates, foot sloggers.
Perhaps that could all be a bit showy. I think this is a job for real men.
Finished.